They mocked, "The poor don't belong here." Then I made one call, and 6 cars arrived, revealing the life I had only dared to imagine. Ella Jenkins caught a glimpse of shadows twisting in the diner's window as she combed her fingers through hair that had grown messy from a long shift. The upscale diner buzzed with laughter from patrons encased in designer suits. There they sat, sharing the latest gossip, their laughter a bitter reminder of dreams beyond her reach. Every poured cup of coffee and served meal reminded her of unfulfilled aspirations, not just for her, but for her son, Jamie, waiting back home in a cramped apartment that felt more like a cage. As she fetched their orders, a voice broke through, icy as midwinter. "Look at her, just a waitress with foolish dreams." The buzz of the diner faded into the backdrop as the haughty patron's laughter echoed in her ears. Ella's heart sank. It was always the same, a smile plastered on her face while the razor edge of condescension bit deeper. The comment wasn't just a dagger, it was a reminder of who she was. A single mother hustling to provide, someone no one believed could aspire to anything greater. Yet, the flickering hope of attending college still clung to her, fragile and tenuous. Her fatigue mingled with indignation. The weight of despair pressed against her chest. How could she climb out of the depths of this relentless cycle? The thought became unbearable, and frustration ignited within her. That's when she retreated to the back of the diner, feeling as if the walls were closing in. Memories of Dr. Thompson, her guiding light from high school, seeped into her thoughts. The way he'd insisted she had potential. The way he'd made her believe. Why hadn't she called him sooner? It felt too big a step, but what did she have to lose? With trembling fingers, she dialed his number, her heart racing with anticipation and dread. Her voice shook as she poured out her dreams, her fears. It felt raw and freeing. "Can you help me find a way out?" He listened, and when he agreed to assist her, a flicker of hope sparked within. Yet, the joy was tempered with anxiety, a tightness in her gut as she glanced out the window toward the gathering storm of uncertainty. Suddenly, the loud roar of powerful engines interrupted her thoughts. 6 sleek cars pulled up outside the diner, their polished exteriors gleaming against the mundane backdrop of her life. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't feel deserving. "What am I doing?" she questioned, the nagging voice clawing at her sanity. As she stepped outside with Jamie beside her, the shadows of her mockers followed like ghosts, taunting her with their disdain. In that moment, she felt the duality of her existence, her newfound opportunity sparking excitement, yet the past loomed ominously. How could she step into this world when she was always belittled? As she approached those cars, the laughter from inside the diner morphed into the chorus of the wealthy elite, who seemed to embody everything she wasn't, until she stumbled across a gala invitation in one of the cars. The name on it connected profoundly to a historical figure in academia, a lineage she never knew existed. This moment felt like a call to arms, to confront the painful past that pulled at the edges of her newfound hope. But the gala wouldn't just be a new beginning, it would be a confrontation. The tension between old wounds and new aspirations surged within her as she wrestled her doubts, forcing her heart to beat steadily. Just then, the very patrons who mocked her strutted in, festooned in silk and satin, as if daring her to prove them wrong. "You don't belong," their sneers echoed, remnants of her shame swelling within, igniting a fire of defiance. Would she crumble under their scrutiny, or stand as a testament to resilience? The question hung heavy as Ella explored her deepest fears, while glancing down at Jamie, who looked up at her, eyes wide with innocence. She had to make a choice, retreat into the shadows or stride into the spotlight and embrace her worth. The night was pregnant with possibility, and the world awaited her answer. Ella stood at the curb, her heart racing as her mind drifted between visions of failure and flickers of hope. The gala invitation dangled from her fingers like a lifeline hanging by a thread. What would stepping into that world mean? A collision between the meager reality she knew and the shimmering skyline of opportunity before her. Could she shift the narrative of her life simply by walking through those doors? As her weary eyes scanned the unfolding scene, the honking horns of the 6 cars blended with the crescendo of laughter drifting from the diner. Each sound was a reminder of her current station, a waitress serving dreams on plates that never seemed destined for her. Yet there was a shift, a new energy that coursed through her veins, igniting the embers of her determination. "Mom," Jamie's small hand tugged at her skirt, his voice a whisper. "Are we going in?" For him, it was simple. He saw excitement where she only felt trepidation. "Yes, sweetie," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "We are." It struck her how much was riding on this moment. It was not just about her anymore. It was about giving Jamie a glimpse of a world that existed outside the diner, a world filled with possibility. As they made their way toward the entrance, a bond of courage formed between them. Jamie's presence filled her with a sense of responsibility that quelled some of her fears. She was not just fighting for herself, she was fighting for him, too. Every step felt heavy, yet electrifying, walking a tightrope between hope and despair. Inside, the gala pulsated with energy, the air thick with ambition and confidence. Glistening chandeliers hung overhead like stars come down to beckon her forward. Each face around her possessed an aura of prestige, dressed in their tailored suits and gowns as they navigated conversations with ease. Ella felt small, but that feeling morphed into a burgeoning sense of resolve as she remembered the invitation in her pocket, the familiar name resonating in the halls of her mind. She sought out Dr. Thompson across the crowd, his familiar visage standing out like a lighthouse amidst the fog. As she approached, his eyes lit with recognition, bringing forth a rush of gratitude. "Ella, I'm so glad you made it," he exclaimed, enveloping her in a warm embrace that forged a protective barrier against self-doubt. "Thank you for believing in me," she replied, and with his support, she felt empowered to confront not only the doubts of others, but also her own haunting insecurities. The conversations around them faded as Dr. Thompson began to speak of her potential, weaving her story into the fabric of his own success. The burdens she carried momentarily lightened. She felt seen not as the waitress, but as a scholar, as a woman with ambitions nurtured by her intelligence and grit. But as flattery filled her ears, the taunts from the diner echoed in her head. It was then Ella spotted familiar faces amidst the guests, those who had mocked her, their sneers still etched in her memory. They laughed and whispered, their eyes darting toward her. "Who does she think she is?" one of them scoffed, her laughter ringing out like broken glass, sharper than before. Ella's heart pounded fiercely. A wave of anxiety mixed with indignation crashed over her. Would she shrink back, letting their derision suffocate her burgeoning confidence? The question loomed larger than the crowd, threatening to bore into her very being. "Don't let them get to you," Dr. Thompson advised, his voice slicing through the chaos within her. "You're more than what they say. You're on the brink of something big." Taking a deep breath, Ella centered herself. Perhaps, instead of retreating, she could confront her insecurities with determination. It was time to confront those who doubted her, to stand in her newfound truth. She had much to learn and much further to go. But these people, these moments, were part of her transformation. A decision crystallized within her as she raised her chin, catching Dr. Thompson's eye with renewed determination. "Tonight I won't hide." With that thought rooted firmly in her mind, she chose to forge ahead, ready to weave her journey into the grand tapestry of possibilities laid before her. The aroma of ambition surrounded her, intoxicating and invigorating. The time had come to face her fears, to carve her place in this unfamiliar territory. How would she confront those who belittled her? Would she find the strength to challenge not just their perceptions, but her own? The night had only just begun, and inside, the possibilities felt endless. Ella stepped deeper into the gala, the arched entrance swallowing her whole into a realm that felt as alien as it was exhilarating. Voices buzzed around her like a hive, each note a reminder of what was at stake. The laughter, once a backdrop to her insecurities, transformed into an energizing symphony, urging her to partake in this new life. Her heart raced not just from anxiety, but anticipation, a visceral reaction to what lay ahead. She felt a gravitational pull toward a group of guests who had gathered around a lavish display of gourmet hors d'oeuvres. Taking one steady breath, she walked towards them, propelled not merely by ambition, but also the quiet need to dismantle the barriers they had erected around her. "Miss, are you lost?" one of the critics sneered, her eyes glimmering with condescension, as though Ella had just wandered in from the street. The others snickered, adding to the abrasive harmony of disdain surrounding her. Confidence wavered momentarily, but she remembered Jamie's trusting face, the way his small hand had grasped hers. "No, I'm not lost," Ella replied, her voice firm enough to surprise even herself. "I'm here precisely where I need to be." The moment stretched, suspended in the air as laughter ceased. They briefly exchanged incredulous glances, with the laughter morphing into a sort of buzz, as if they were unsure how to process this unexpected response. Dr. Thompson observed from a distance, an encouraging smile spreading across his face. He had instilled confidence in her, but now it was up to her to nurture it. The very audacity of her words ignited a small flame within her, one that sought to consume self-doubt rather than be consumed by it. Moving closer, she introduced herself to the group, wrangling her thoughts into a semblance of structure despite the clamoring voices in her head. "I'm Ella, a student mentored by Dr. Thompson. I'm also a single mother," she added, allowing vulnerability to punctuate her strength. The words fell like a stone cast into a pond, creating ripples. One woman stepped forward, eyebrows raised, looking both surprised and unamused. "How nice! Is this your first gala? They often can be quite overwhelming for newcomers," she said, her tone dripping with faux sympathy. "I've served at countless of them," Ella retorted, finding her footing against the biting sarcasm. "But this time, I'm not just a part of the decor." A spark ignited in a few onlookers' eyes. Perhaps they were sensing her transformation. Ella intertwined her past and present into a narrative that became a bridge connecting her struggles as a waitress with her aspirations. It was a calculated risk to expose her vulnerabilities, but she knew the consequences of playing small. "These opportunities are meant for anyone willing to chase them, no matter where we come from," she asserted, catching sight of her reflection in a nearby glass display. Her confidence swelled, tempered by the reality of her circumstances, but unfurling wings nonetheless. Each second spent sharing her story fortified her resolve to reclaim her narrative, turning remarks meant to wound into stepping stones toward her ambition. As she navigated further into this world rife with judgment, ill will began to feel more like a faint whisper, a background hum against her growing determination. Perhaps it was not about banishing her fears entirely. It was about learning to dance with them, to acknowledge their presence without letting them dictate her path. In the thrumming heart of the gala, Ella's thoughts shifted rapidly. What if there was something more at play here, something beyond mere appearances and conversations? A glimmer of a realization began to take shape. What if tonight was not just a step toward her future, but a turning point where she could reclaim not just her story, but help reshape the narratives of others too? As the evening pressed on, she made a pact with herself to reach out beyond typical boundaries and confront not just individuals who had hurt her, but to engage in broader conversations about potential and possibility. The gathering, it seemed, was not just a showcase of elite privilege, but could also be a catalyst for meaningful connections. With newfound courage, Ella surveyed the crowd, her eyes landing on a small cluster discussing innovative projects. Her chance. But before she could take a step forward, she noticed a shadow linger in her peripheral vision, a familiar figure she hadn't anticipated finding here. Would confronting this person mean revisiting old wounds or stepping into a future free of their weight? An unexpected tension began to coil tightly around her, grounding her determination, while also unsettling her progress. The evening, rich with possibility, now bore the question of how far she was willing to venture into her own transformation. Ella steadied her breath as her gaze locked onto the shadow she recognized. It was Mark, an ex-colleague from the restaurant where she had spent years serving tables. Memories flooded her mind, a rush of late shifts, contemptuous stares, and nights of feeling invisible, permeated by stress and self-doubt. The moment was saturated with the weight of their shared history, a tapestry of resentment and misunderstanding woven intricately over time. She forced herself to resist the impulse to retreat. Ella understood this wasn't merely about her past with Mark, but rather a test of who she was becoming. Could she confront the remnants of that chapter without succumbing to its darkness? Ella took a step forward, integrating purpose into her movements. As she approached, the laughter around them dimmed, a spotlight fading into the background, centering on her intentions and the uncertainty dancing in the air. "Mark," she said, her tone measured but firm. "What are you doing here?" With a smirk, he leaned against a marble pillar, surveying her as if she were a curiosity. "Thought I'd witness the spectacle. Didn't expect to see you here, though." He looked her up and down, as if gauging the changes in her, trying to reconcile the confident woman before him with the forgotten waitress he once knew. "How fascinating," she countered, deflecting his mockery. "We all have choices to make, don't we?" The challenge in her voice pierced the air between them, carving through the schism left by years of discontent. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if she idealized her transformation. Did she truly belong here, or was she merely putting on a performance? But the answer came to her, sharp and clear. She had earned her place in this world, one deliberate step at a time. Their interaction drew the attention of nearby guests, their narrative unfolding like a delicate flower in a tropical storm. Ella sensed eyes flicking away from the previous discussions, eyes analyzing this confrontation. The thrill of being seen, of having her narrative acknowledged, surged through her. Every glance felt like a confirmation of her new identity, one that demanded respect in a space historically cultivated for the elite. Unfazed, Mark leaned in, a facade of confidence draping over insecurities like a cloak. "Still playing the underdog, huh? Didn't you get the memo? It's not about where you started, it's about who you know." His words dripped with the same old entitlement that had always suffocated her. Ella's heartbeat quickened, but this time it wasn't laced with fear. "Knowing people is important," she replied, her voice low and steady. "But so is owning our experiences." The words lingered, creating an electrifying pause. In that moment, she understood the importance of advocating not just for herself, but for others drowned out by silence. "Why does that matter to you, Ella?" Mark countered, skepticism tinting his gaze. "You think this changes anything? You're still a nobody, just wearing a fancy dress." "No," she shot back, instinctively defensive. "I'm claiming the space I've long been denied, and you're wrong if you think I'm defined by your perception." The energy in her grew palpable, resonating with those around her. As their exchange unfolded, Ella felt a shift within. Every word became armor, a declaration of her newfound agency. She was not merely reacting to his taunts, she was asserting herself amidst a crucible of expectations. The laughter surrounding them resurfaced, laughter that now lacked malice. Their attentiveness became a force, pushing her further into her message. Suddenly, she was no longer the underdog, but a challenger, expanding the scope of their perceptions. In that moment, Ella realized the liberation inherent in speaking her truth. The confrontation wasn't merely about her relationship with Mark, but about a broader dialogue. How could she make this an opportunity? As tension ebbed and flowed, she formulated a plan, envisioning how far she could propel this moment beyond her own insecurities. What if she could turn this gala into a channel for showcasing potential, galvanizing those like her who felt unseen? Ella's mind buzzed with thoughts of connections she could forge, alliances she could build. With resolve tightening her stomach, she decided to transform the encounter into an anchor for broader change. With one last glance at Mark, she pivoted, her heart pounding with promise and anticipation. It was time to reach out, to mend the fabric of her reality with threads sewn from courage and creativity. But before she fully turned away, she caught sight of Dr. Thompson approaching, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. Would he endorse her daring expansion of the evening's possibilities, or would he see her confrontation as a misstep? Would he accept her emergence from the shadows or pull her back to a familiar past she desperately sought to escape? Dr. Thompson approached with a deliberate calmness that belied the storm within Ella's mind. She could sense the scrutiny in his gaze, a mix of interest and apprehension. Unsure if he was more concerned about her confrontation with Mark or the wider implications of her challenge, Ella felt a pulse of anxiety rise in her chest. The stakes felt elevated, yet she stood her ground, the thrill of her own courage cascading through her. "Ella," Dr. Thompson began, his voice steady but curious. "I saw you and Mark. Care to share what just played out?" His question was not just an inquiry. It felt like an invitation to review her actions. In that moment, Ella realized the importance of seizing control over this conversation, steering it toward the future she envisioned. "I'm making a statement," she replied, her tone anchored in conviction. "It's about presence. It's time people like me are included, instead of treated as remnants of a past nobody wants to remember." Dr. Thompson's expression softened, the intrigue in his eyes flickering with admiration. "And you think this gala is the right place for this?" "Yes," she asserted. "It's not merely about showcasing who we are, but exploring who we could become." As these words tumbled out, Ella felt a thrill of liberation, unearthing a hidden ambition to create spaces, not just for herself, but for others who had been brushed aside. "Interesting approach," he commented, weighing her words meticulously, as though measuring their potential impact. "But how do you plan to catalyze this change? What's the strategy behind your passion?" Ella's mind raced with possibilities. She envisioned events that brought together voices and experiences, each a vibrant thread in the larger tapestry of their community. "I want to lead through connections. Let's connect those who have resources with those who aspire to reach greater heights." She paused, gauging Thompson's response. "Imagine inviting key figures here with stories that resonate with those of us who have faced adversity. I could create panel discussions, workshops, add depth to the experience people have at this gala." "Sounds ambitious, and yet—" He trailed off, sensing the gravity of her ambition, but also the risk of stepping too far outside established norms. "But?" Ella prodded, watching for the subtle cues of hesitation. "There is a significant lift when creating these platforms," Thompson cautioned, his brows knitting together. "You'll need allies willing to listen and adjust their perspectives. Not everyone will be receptive." She felt like a balloon teetering on the edge of being inflated, full of ideas but precariously light. "I understand, but it's necessary, Dr. Thompson. What's the point of being here if we don't confront the narratives that exist? I can't back down. I need this to mean something beyond a night out." Dr. Thompson studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her resolve against his own experiences. The silence stretched out between them, a swirl of potential and imminent decision. "All right, Ella," he finally said, commitment, albeit cautious, in his tone. "I'm intrigued. How can I help you transform this idea into reality? Let's see what we can initiate together." Her heart skipped. This was not just permission, it was a collaborative opportunity. Ella's vision felt suddenly grounded and actionable, the momentum shifting decisively in her favor. Yet, even as optimism bubbled in her chest, she felt the specter of Mark's taunts echo mercilessly in the back of her mind. Would she prove him wrong, or would the weight of expectation crush her initiatives before they truly began? "Let's start with a meeting. Perhaps next week," she proposed, her voice steady, emboldened by newfound purpose. "Let's do that," Dr. Thompson replied, nodding. As he turned to re-engage with the gathering, Ella felt the exhilarating potential of her resolve, cementing the groundwork for her ambitions. But beneath this newfound certainty, doubt festered. Would rallying the right people around her concepts unleash a movement, or would it all shatter amidst old fears? Unfazed, she pushed through the lingering uncertainty, ready to embrace whatever came next. As Ella glanced back toward Mark, lingering at the fringes of the gala, she could see shadows of those whose narratives still needed amplifying. The moment for action was approaching. A revolution, however small, could begin at any time. But just as she prepared to step further into her new role, a glimmer of recognition crossed her vision. A face familiar, yet foreign, standing beyond the threshold of her aspirations, watching closely with intent. Would this new figure be an ally, or yet another obstacle to face? Ella stood frozen for a moment, her heart racing as she locked eyes with the familiar face. It was Julia, a former colleague from her last job, now radiant and impeccably dressed, a stark contrast to the worn, battle-hardened version of herself Ella often presented. Julia had always commanded attention effortlessly, wielding her charisma like a weapon in the corporate world. But it was her access to a powerful network that made her truly formidable, a resource Ella could only dream of having at her disposal. "Ella!" Julia called, her tone both warm and condescending. "What a surprise to see you here!" Ella felt a shift in the atmosphere, the air thickening with unspoken tension. Julia had left that role behind, climbing the proverbial ladder while Ella had stayed rooted in a place that felt increasingly suffocating. The smile stretched across Julia's face, but Ella could read beneath. It was an invitation to re-enter a world she had distanced herself from. "Looks like you're trying to make waves," Julia continued, her eyes sparkling with a mix of curiosity and judgment. "I hope you know what you're getting into." Ella squared her shoulders, refusing to be intimidated. "I am," she replied cautiously, wary of the condescension lurking just below the surface of Julia's words. "In fact, I have plans to bring real narratives to the forefront." "Is that so?" Julia raised an eyebrow, her interest piqued. "You need support for something like that. You know how hard it can be without the right connections." The remark resonated too sharply, mirroring her own insecurities about the upcoming meeting with Dr. Thompson. The network, the allies, those were concepts she was still grappling with. "I actually have some support," Ella countered, conjuring an image of Dr. Thompson's cautious yet open demeanor, willing to go against the grain. "But I'd be curious to know what you think of my approach." "Why not reach out to high-profile people then?" Julia asked, leaning closer. "You could use my contacts. You're not the only one who sees a gap in the narrative. I know people who could help." It was a tempting proposition, yet Ella sensed an ulterior motive behind it. She wouldn't be surprised if Julia aimed for a chance to stake her own claim in this movement, to capitalize on some trending notion of inclusivity. "And what's in it for you?" Ella challenged, her voice firm. Caught off guard, Julia faltered for just a moment, but regained her composure quickly. "It's simple. Partnerships can elevate us both. Think of the exposure. We could make an impact on a larger scale. And who knows, you might surprise everyone." Ella scrutinized Julia's expression, as if searching for the cracks in her facade. There was something insidious at play. A tempting offer wound tightly with strings that could bind her in ways she might not yet see. She wrestled with the thought of reaching out to her former contact. Could she truly rely on Julia's network, or would it dilute her message, twisting it to fit someone else's narrative? "I appreciate the offer, Julia," she replied, carefully weighing her next words. "But I want to retain authenticity. This isn't just for show. It's about ensuring those marginalized voices are truly heard. Julia waved her hand dismissively, a hint of frustration crossing her face. Authenticity doesn't pay the bills, Ella. Build those connections, and the narrative will follow. Just think about it. As Julia stepped away, the knot of tension in Ella's stomach tightened. She stood at a precipice, balancing ambition against authenticity. Moments later, when Dr. Thompson rejoined her, she felt the weight of Julia's proposition pressing against her. Would she lean into the allure of bigger connections, or forge her path in the raw honesty of her experiences? "The meeting next week," Dr. Thompson said, breaking through her spiraling thoughts. "Have you thought about what you'd like to present?" Ella nodded, but felt the growing uncertainty gnawing at her resolve. "I'll prepare for that," she said, though her mind raced with potential pivots influenced by Julia's suggestion. Later, as she retreated to her car, the kaleidoscope of choices spun in her head. Each decision weighed heavier than the last. The temerity that had pushed her this far now felt like an anchor, tethering her to old fears as new opportunities beckoned from the horizon. But the thought of Julia's words lingered like a phantom itch. What if enveloping herself in a network meant losing the core of her mission? And as Ella pulled out of the dimly lit parking lot, she couldn't shake the looming question. Was she strong enough to navigate this field of alliances, or would she crumble under the pressure of expectations? What lay ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. She was on the brink of an unpredictable journey into realms that might challenge everything she once believed. Would she embrace the potential of Julia's connections, or would she carve her own path, irrespective of the risks involved? The week flew by in a blur of preparation and self-doubt. Ella strategized endlessly, her mind a chaotic cacophony of ideas, potential risks, and the ever-looming shadow of Julia's proposition. The day of the meeting with Dr. Thompson loomed large, anticipation mingling with anxiety, pushing her further into a spiral of questioning her own values and the authenticity of her voice. In her cramped office, Ella perched at her desk, her laptop decorated with sticky notes full of keywords and half-formed thoughts. She gazed out the window, watching the way the trees swayed in the wind, their resilience against external forces a stark contrast to her internal struggle. Was she striving for authenticity, or was she simply grasping for validation? The whispered words of Julia haunted her, compelling her to consider shortcuts paved with well-connected allies. But those shortcuts came with strings attached, strings she was wary of entwining with her dreams. As the clock inched forward, she mentally rehearsed her presentation for Dr. Thompson. The vision of bringing marginalized voices to the forefront, her mission, sparked a flicker of determination within her. She had seen those voices silenced, had felt their weight pushing against her own heart for too long. But with every flicker of hope was a cruel reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. "Ella, are you ready?" Dr. Thompson's voice broke through her reverie, a note of genuine concern lacing his inquiry. Taking a deep breath, Ella forced a smile, masking her turmoil. "I think so. I've been refining my approach based on our previous discussions." "Let's see what you've got," he encouraged, ushering her into the meeting room, where the atmosphere was charged with expectation. She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears, each beat echoing doubts about her ability to deliver an impactful presentation. With every word she articulated during her presentation, Ella grew more confident. She spoke from her heart, each point resonating deeply with her convictions. The charts, the statistics, and the anecdotes she shared painted a vivid tapestry of the urgent need for representation. Dr. Thompson nodded, his face an unreadable mask, but the slight smile that flickered as she concluded gave her hope. "Very insightful, Ella," he said, his eyes gleaming with approval. "You've illustrated the gap remarkably, but let's talk strategy. How do you envision implementing this? What's your outreach plan?" Ella swallowed hard, Julia's voice surfacing like an unwelcome ghost. She hesitated. "I've considered reaching out to various stakeholders, Perhaps influencers who align with our mission. A shadow crossed Dr. Thompson's face. You'll need more than good intentions. Your network is minimal. They'll expect partnerships, real alliances. Have you thought about leveraging other professionals? His words draped over her like a heavy shroud. The idea of reaching out to powerful contacts wasn't foreign, but the thought of doing so without sacrificing her core principles felt like walking a tightrope. Honestly, Ella began, surprising herself with her candidness, I've been grappling with that. I want to remain true to the authenticity of this message, seeking out connections like Julia has suggested. It's tempting, but feels disingenuous. Dr. Thompson regarded her thoughtfully, the corners of his mouth twisting in an encouraging manner. Trust your instinct. Authenticity doesn't equate to isolation. Network strategically, but remain true to your voice. That strength is your competitive advantage. As Ella left the meeting, it dawned on her that she stood at a crossroads. Embracing connections didn't necessitate the denouncement of her mission. It was about weaving her ideals into the relationships she chose to cultivate. Determined, she reached into her bag and picked up her phone, ready to dial numbers she had previously hesitated to approach. But just as she was about to hit call, doubt crept in again. What if these connections came with compromises? What if she lost more than she gained? Challenging her own fear, Ella felt the weight of her aspirations crash against the shoreline of reality. She would need to confront this dilemma head-on. Was this the moment she would decide how far she was willing to go to fight for her cause? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm hues against her office window, she realized this journey would demand confrontation, not only with those willing to undermine her, but also with herself. How would she carve her path in this intricate balance of ambition and authenticity? What lay ahead was a delicate dance of influence and integrity. It was time to face the ultimate question. Would she find the courage to claim her narrative or let someone else dictate it? The following morning, Ella awoke with the soft light filtering through her curtains, but the weight of uncertainty pressed on her chest like a heavy blanket. Today was different. Today, her decision loomed. Her choice to reach out and forge connections could either anchor her mission or drag her under. She stared at her phone, its screen still lit with the names of contacts she had previously deemed unreachable. She paced the cramped confines of her office, every step echoing the tension swirling inside her. Would she adapt to the landscape of professional alliances and risk her authenticity? Or would she cling stubbornly to her ideals and potentially miss crucial opportunities? As she resolved to confront her fears, the power of narrative returned to her mind, a narrative that was too important to distort. How could she create change if she didn't allow herself to carry the weight of it? Grabbing her notebook, Ella jotted down a list of potential allies, people she had crossed paths with or admired from afar. Among them was Ryan, an established figure in the field of advocacy. They had met at a conference but had lost touch amidst their professional endeavors. Reaching out was daunting. He operated in spaces where influence flowed freely, and she feared his network would come with expectations. With her hands trembling, Ella pressed the dial button next to his name. The phone rang, amplifying her anxiety with each second. But as he answered, the warmth in his voice grounded her momentarily. They exchanged pleasantries, and Ella found her footing in the conversation. Ryan, I've been thinking a lot about collaboration lately. Your work with marginalized voices has always inspired me, and I'd love to discuss how we might work together, she said, pulling every bit of conviction she had into her words. The response was positive. Ryan was open to a meeting. After hanging up, Ella felt the first flicker of hope ignite within her. Each call she made afterwards filled her with a growing sense of agency. Striking up conversations, discussing shared missions, and plotting out ways to combine efforts fed her belief that authenticity and strategy could coexist. This was a turning point. She was weaving her values into the fabric of her outreach. Yet, as the day wore on, fear began creeping back into her thoughts. A nagging voice whispered doubts. Were her efforts genuine, or merely another tilting of the scales in favor of convenience? She had noticed the tension in other professionals when she mentioned her passion for true representation. Was her voice loud enough among the cacophony that often drowned out truths? In confrontation with her spiraling concerns, Ella took a moment to breathe deeply as the dusk light cast long shadows across her desk. Determined, she affirmed to herself that while the journey would test her resolve, the threads of connection she was spinning could also offer strength to those unheard. She picked up her notebook again and penned a commitment to herself. This enterprise would be built on transparency, inclusivity, and mutual respect, guardrails for her vision. But the deeper she delved into the professional landscape, the more she sensed looming shadows, unexplainable interests operating just under the surface, waiting for her misstep. A few days later, a meeting was set with Ryan and another potential collaborator, Nora, a powerful journalist. As anticipation surged within her, Ella couldn't shake the feeling that something pivotal was about to unfold. What if their paths intertwined in ways she hadn't fully anticipated? What if they challenged her motives and forced her to delve deeper into her own authenticity? As the day approached, she realized how vital it would be to embrace her own narrative, both personal and professional. Standing on this precipice of transformation, Ella gasped at the notion of what lay ahead. Confrontation not only with these potential allies, but also the truth of her own convictions. Each meeting brought unknown testa, where she would either ally or isolate herself within the circles she sought to navigate. As the sun dipped once more, she recalled Dr. Thompson's words about authenticity. This journey was her own to claim and define, and the time had come to face the truth of her alliances, heart set on one resolution: to own her narrative completely. But would she hold on to her values or bend under pressure when challenges arose? Ella arrived at the cafe 20 minutes early, her nerves a whirlwind of doubt and determination. The sun was just starting to peek through the clouds, casting a gentle hue over the outdoor seating. Yet, beneath this serene facade, her heart raced. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the autumn air. This was it, the meeting that could fundamentally shift her trajectory. As she set her notebook on the table, she replayed their previous conversations in her head. Ryan had been welcoming, but what would Nora bring to the table? Would she share the same passion for driving change, or would she only seek an agenda masked by altruism? Ella's apprehension simmered beneath her resolve. She was stepping into a potential alliance with her ideals hanging delicately in the balance. Nora arrived a few minutes later, exuding confidence as she approached. Her stride was purposeful, and her dark hair framed her sharp features, suggesting a no-nonsense perspective that had likely carved her path in the competitive world of journalism. Ella's breath caught as Nora extended her hand, a swift smile brightening her expression. "Thank you for meeting with us," Ella said, voicing gratitude while testing her own conviction. She hoped her sincerity would pierce through the layers of professional decorum. "Of course. I've been following the work you're doing," Nora replied, her voice steady, yet Ella detected something behind it, perhaps skepticism, perhaps challenge. "But I must admit, I'm curious about what you really bring to this conversation. Advocacy is complex, and people tend to underestimate its demands." Ella's heart quickened. It was a challenge, but one she had anticipated. This was not just about presenting herself well, it was about articulating her vision clearly. "My approach focuses on transparency and inclusivity. I believe in creating spaces where every voice can be heard and valued." Her voice was solid, laced with a commitment to uphold her beliefs amidst the scrutiny. As they settled into conversation, Ryan chimed in with enthusiasm, progressively steering the discussion toward their combined efforts. He proposed ideas that intertwined their skills. Ella could initiate community outreach, while Nora could amplify these narratives through her platform. However, each suggestion felt like a plank shifting beneath her. They were moving swiftly, and Ella couldn't shake the feeling that the undertones of power dynamics needed clarifying. Every time Nora interjected with a statistic or compelling insight, Ella felt the weight of her words pressing down. Were they built on a foundation of authenticity or pressure to conform? Could she still define her vision without being swallowed by the tides of popularity? Her commitment to genuine representation loomed large, yet it was becoming increasingly challenging to hold on to her narrative when faced with the possibility of compromise. Nora, picking up on Ella's hesitations, leaned forward, her expression turning earnest. You need to understand that the landscape you want to navigate is about perception. Success isn't merely about ideals. You need to sell your vision, make it palatable. Are you ready for that? Because the industry won't slow down for your ideals. Ella's resolve was tested. A pang of frustration tugged at her insides. But shouldn't ideals shape the industry rather than be molded by it? She countered, her voice gaining strength. The moment hung between them, charged, as both women wrestled with the tension of their opposing views. Ryan glanced back and forth, sensing the growing intensity. Maybe we all need to bridge the gap between authenticity and influence, he suggested, hoping to ease the looming conflict. The conversation shifted, but Ella's mind spiraled. Was she ready to sacrifice her ideals for the sake of acceptance? This challenge was her moment, a test to define not just her mission, but also her resilience against manipulation. As she left the cafe, the air felt denser, almost suffocating. Ella knew she was on the brink of pivotal changes, but with questions still swirling inside her, she grappled with the thought. Could she truly navigate the delicate dance of authenticity and influence, and what would it mean for her narrative moving forward? Tomorrow's meeting with a potential investor loomed, and with it, new dilemmas awaited. Would she bend to fit the mold or push against the current and risk losing everything? As she walked home, that single thought replayed in her mind, echoing louder than the rush of the city surrounding her. What will you sacrifice for success? The day of the meeting with the potential investor dawned bright and exhilarating, yet it came laden with the weight of expectation. Ella stood before the mirror, adjusting her blouse, a simple yet professional choice that encapsulated both her identity and aspirations. She had spent hours reviewing materials, rehearsing arguments, imagining scenarios. But more than anything, she needed to reaffirm her commitment to her original vision, to amplify the voices of those often overlooked. As she stepped into the upscale office building, the stark contrast to her past life struck her anew. The plush carpets and glass walls felt alien, yet they also ignited her determination. She was no longer the waitress merely serving coffee and dreams. She was someone who had reclaimed agency. Today was not just about impressing a potential investor. It was about self-affirmation and standing firm on the principles she had woven into her mission. The conference room was expansive, filled with polished wood and state-of-the-art technology. Large windows revealed the skyline, a dizzying array of possibilities that mirrored her aspirations. As she settled into her seat, the investor, a charismatic woman named Margaret, entered with an aura of authority that filled the space. Ella had researched Margaret diligently, uncovering her storied track record of supporting various initiatives. Yet behind that positive facade, Ella felt an undercurrent of scrutiny. Would Margaret appreciate her vision? Or would she seek to pull it into a more commercially viable narrative? Ella, I'm excited to hear about your project, Margaret said, clasping her hands together as she leaned forward, an expectant smile on her lips. Thank you for meeting with me, Ella replied, her heart pounding, yet fueled by an unyielding sense of purpose. I've been developing a plan to create a platform that elevates marginalized voices through education, mentorship, and community-focused initiatives. As she articulated her vision, Ella felt the power of her words reinforce her own conviction. She provided vivid examples, drawing from her experiences and the stories of those she aimed to uplift. She watched as a furrow formed on Margaret's brow, the investor clearly absorbing each detail with care. "Fascinating," Margaret interjected, her pen dancing across the notepad. "But let's address the elephant in the room. Funding is critical, and I need to know how you intend to make this financially sustainable without compromising the essence of your vision." The question struck at the core of Ella's battle. How could she navigate the perilous waters of funding without sacrificing authenticity? It was a dance she had rehearsed, yet now she faced the reality of the constraints that came inherently with progress. "I see this as an opportunity to cultivate genuine partnerships," Ella affirmed. "I propose engaging corporations while ensuring they align with our mission to uplift diverse narratives. We won't merely chase capital. We'll build relationships grounded in shared values." Margaret considered her words, understanding flickering in her gaze. "Interesting. In my experience, aligning with corporations isn't always about mission compatibility. Sometimes their interests diverge sharply from ours. How will you safeguard against that?" Ella felt the room tighten. It was the same challenge she had encountered with Julia and Nora, perhaps even with Mark. "My commitment is to transparency and engagement," she asserted, confidence surging through her. "I won't shy away from difficult conversations, nor will I compromise my values. They must see the value not just in the metrics, but in true advocacy." As the conversation flowed, Ella found her rhythm, firmly rooted in the dual pillars of authenticity and practicality. They discussed the intricacies of sustainable business models, potential outreach strategies, and measurable outcomes. With each response, Ella felt her presence solidifying in that dynamic landscape. The investor's room was no longer an intimidating stage. It transformed into her platform for advocacy. Midway through their discourse, Margaret leaned back, a smile creeping across her face. "I like your approach, Ella. You're aware of realities while remaining committed to your vision. That's commendable." A warm glow surged through Ella. Validation from someone admired in her industry lifted a burden off her shoulders. It felt more than applause. It was confirmation that her journey had led to a place of professional acknowledgement and integrity. "Thank you, Margaret," Ella replied, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "This vision is personal. It's crucial, not only for me, but for a multitude of voices searching for representation." As their meeting concluded, Margaret made it clear she would be willing to invest, contingent on further discussions and assurances of alignment with their ethical principles. Ella's heart swelled as they exchanged goodbyes, each note of hope anchoring her in the reality of what she had just experienced. Walking out of that building, the weight of doubt that had previously clung to her evaporated. A triumph of conviction over uncertainty. She had traversed through layers of self-doubt, confrontations, and expectations, emerging fortified in her purpose. Later that evening, she gathered with Jamie at their modest apartment. The walls hadn't changed, but they felt different now, infused with new possibilities. She looked down at her son, who held her hand, simple and trusting. "Did you win, Mom?" he asked, his eyes sparkling with innocent excitement. "Yes, sweetie, I think I did," she replied, beaming down at him, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. This was the moment she had worked toward, not merely for herself, but for him and others who carried burdens similar to her own. As Ella cradled the hope burgeoning around her, she realized the unique power of transformation, to not only claim her narrative, but craft a path for others seeking their own. As she settled into the warmth of their home, she felt confidence radiate through her. She was not just a waitress, she was an advocate, a catalyst for change. Tomorrow would hold new challenges, but tonight she stood as a testament to her journey. It was time to initiate the next phase, the groundwork for a movement echoing the stories that mattered. And as always, in her heart, she knew she had earned this moment, having transformed every facet of herself from the ashes of doubt into the gold of possibility. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.